While we've all been rightfully excited about the New Orleans Saints offense, it was the defense today that stood out and stood up. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big thank you to all the everydayers out there making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can always subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss the latest episodes. And as always, if you want to keep that conversation going one-on-one with me, as well as take part in our exclusive film studies, Q&As, early access to information, as well as insider information, you can head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints. Today, as always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on your favorite social media, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You can find me as the senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site covering the New Orleans Saints. You can also find me every Tuesday on the Locked On NFL podcast and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Tell you more about them later on today's episode. We're going to get you caught up on all the news and notes from an eventful day 7 of New Orleans Saints training camp, and of course, including attendance and injuries. We're also going to take a look at Bryan Bresee and Pete Werner contributing to what I would consider my unheralded play of the day. But first, I want to take a look at the New Orleans Saints defense as a whole because the Saints defense dominated day 7. And I'm not just talking about the big names like Demario Davis and Cam Jordan and Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. All those guys did have good days. I think Cam Jordan was a little in and out, but I do think that for the most part, we also saw beyond that guys with the second team defense, third team defense for what that's worth, also making some big plays. So we're going to highlight all of that to get started. And this is one of those big pieces that I think has always been a part of Dennis Allen's vision for this New Orleans Saints team. This is the identity that this team wants for itself, is to be a team that is able to kind of rest its laurels and hang its hat on the fact that it is a good, steady, solid, and reliable defensive team with a good, steady, solid, and reliable defensive scheme. And to kind of put that in sort of the frame of reference here, I actually want to talk about somebody over on the offensive side that highlighted it. We did get to speak with Derek Carr today post-practice, and I asked Derek Carr a little bit about how he feels about the defensive line and their ability to get pressure on a quarterback. And he mentioned that the defensive line has made his life challenging as a quarterback in these New Orleans Saints practices. He told us the other day that he actually told Dennis Allen, hey, I love practicing here because the defense is really good, really solid, and makes it hard to be able to just go out there and get things done. They don't make it easy on you. And a big part of one of the, not a big part, but one of the reasons that he highlighted that was because of the defensive line. And so when I asked him about the defensive line making it troublesome for him, he said, yeah. And one of the things that they do is that even though you can't, sack a quarterback during practice, they're wearing their red jerseys, all that other stuff. They are at least in a situation to where if you're able to get them off of their spot or pressure everything, that quarterback still has to move off of their throwing spot. And that is what Derek Carr highlighted, is that the New Orleans Saints defensive line has done a very good job moving him off of his spot and getting him to the point to where if you have to move off of your spot, you're interrupting things like timing and rhythm with between the quarterback and the wide receiver and all that stuff. So I would keep that in mind when you're thinking about, oh, well, they can't actually sack the quarterback in practice, so what are you actually learning? These are some of the things that we're learning. And I actually went a step further and I asked Derek Carr about a lot of defensive linemen will say, hey, it's not all about the sacks. It's about pressures. It's about hits on the quarterback, things like that. And I asked him, does he, believe that to be true as well? And he said, absolutely. And the way that they talked about a guy like Aaron Donald last year, who was a first-team All-Pro, who didn't have the sacks that he would usually rack up throughout the season, but lived in the backfield, and that still makes life challenging for the quarterback. And so one of the reasons why when we talk about the Saints being top 5 in sacks last year, which they were with 48, we always kind of have to caveat as well that they were toward the bottom of the NFL when it came to, or at least toward the bottom half of the NFL, when it came to pressures as well as QB hits. And that's why that's important, because those pressures and QB hits and moving quarterbacks off of their spot, getting into that quarterback's mind and mentals, that becomes a big part of the game of a defensive lineman as well. So just as important as the sacks are, the rest of it is important for this defensive line as well. Appreciate everybody for being here live with us. I see all y'all, as well as everybody that catches the show later. I know we're a little earlier here than usual today, but we just have a lot of stuff going on throughout the day today, so I wanted to make sure that I got to you and that something else didn't pop up that ended up keeping me from being able to do the show today. So appreciate y'all very much for being here. The other way that the Saints defense really kind of showed out today was in pass coverage, whether it's the linebackers, guys like Anthony Orji, as well as DeMarco Jackson, as well as Pete Werner making big plays in coverage. You also saw Troy Pride Jr. walk away with another interception, only the second interception during team drills of camp so far, third interception as a whole. The other interception was during one-on-ones where Jameis Winston threw a pass to Michael Thomas. It popped out of his hands, and then Paulson Adebo was able to secure it. But these were other guys that had really solid days, and Troy Pride Jr. in particular had a really, really nice one. The ball was kind of thrown a little bit behind A.T. Perry, who was the intended receiver, but A.T. Perry not being able to get back to help fight for the ball didn't really help the situation either. And so it was just a little bit of like an overrun versus an underthrow. The throw came from Jameis Winston, and Troy Pride Jr. was able to just kind of step in and make sure that he secured it for the interception. Big takeaway for that New Orleans Saints defense. We also saw several guys with pass breakups, including Paulson Adebo, who had a pass breakup on Michael Thomas on a target from Derek Carr. Michael Thomas and Derek Carr tried some things today that they wouldn't usually try in a game. Derek Carr kind of spoke about that in his post-practice presser with us as well, when he sort of spoke about, look, there was a throw that I put out there to Mike that I wouldn't usually put out there, that I would have actually just checked down in an in-game situation. But hey, I want to get those passes in. And some of those, what I would call training camp passes, is the way you'll hear me refer to them as we move forward. But with those training camp practices, it was, it's one of those things to where it's like, I'm going to try something that I wouldn't usually try in a game. The same maybe could have been said about the Jameis Winston interception that ended up getting picked off by Troy Pride. Maybe that's a pass that you don't try in game, but you're in training camp, so like give your guy the opportunity to go up there and make the play. And I think that that's where Derek Carr and Michael Thomas were at an earlier point, not on this pass breakup. This pass breakup was just a really good play by Paulson Adebo, but at earlier points, Derek Carr kind of forcing some passes into Michael Thomas that he wouldn't usually force into Michael Thomas, but doing it in such a way that it's like, all right, I'm just going to give him a shot. And actually connected on 2 out of the 3 of those. The other one ended up falling incomplete. But yeah, I look at this New Orleans Saints defense, and you saw pressures from guys like Bryan Bresee, who we'll speak about here in just a moment, because he and Pete Werner kind of collaborated on a play that is our play of the day today. We also saw pressure and a good run stop, fantastic run stop by Payton Turner, who's, again, continuing to show up day in and day out. We saw some good run defense from Isaiah Foskey on a couple of reps, not so good on others. Remember, he's learning a new technique as a whole over on the defensive line. And then we also saw a really, really nice pass breakup as well from Pete Werner, who was not Pete Werner, I'm so sorry, Zach Bond, my apologies, who was covering a tight end that was headed towards the sideline. I believe it was Lucas Kroll, and that was going out towards the outside, and Zach Bond did a good job coming underneath that pass, coming underneath the receiver to be able to knock that one away. So really, really, really good opportunities there for this defense, and not only the opportunities, but cashing in on them and making sure that they were making those big plays as well. We even saw some PBUs and some wins for DBs. Troy Pride, Alontae Taylor, Paulson Adebo, Adrian Fry, and one-on-ones as well, which we know are very, very much very, very much weighted towards the offensive side. So I always like to shout out the defenders when they do win those. But let's take a look, and we'll break down very specifically a play that Derek Carr was in on, that Pete Werner made, and that Bryan Bresee helped to create. Let's get to that as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by America's #1 sports book. It's FanDuel. And if it's your first time betting with FanDuel, it's a great time to take a first swing at betting MLB odds over on FanDuel, because you're going to get 10 times your first bet amount back in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. If you put down $20 on a bet, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets back, whether you win or lose. That's $200 that you can put down on another money line bet. Maybe you want to look at an over-under somewhere, or you want to take a look at who might hit the first home run in a game. You can do all of that on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use, and once you win, you instantly get paid out. There's no better place to bet MLB odds than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today at FanDuel.com/locked on to get up to $200 in bonus bets. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Taking a look now at the play of the day. This was a defensive play that I really, really loved, that really started with interior pressure. So we want to break that down and take a look at what happened. Appreciate you as always. We get Locked On Saints, your first listen of the day every day here on the show. And all you everydayers out there, whether you're joining us live or joining us later, I appreciate y'all very much for being here. I want to caution everybody, because I see a lot of people reacting to the Isaiah Foskey thing that I mentioned. Don't worry about it. Like, Isaiah Foskey's learning an entirely new position. Think of Isaiah Foskey right now being a cornerback that's transitioning into a slot corner role. It's that drastic to move you inside that inside shoulder of a tackle and say, go defend the run. Don't worry about rushing the passer right now. It's a very, very different game that he's playing right now than what he did in college. Don't worry about overreacting to that. So let's take a look at the guy that did get some QB pressure today that ended up creating a really, really great opportunity for Pete Werner. So this was a snap from Derek Carr in the final snap of his second team drill. So they did 3 different sets of team drills today. Derek Carr threw 5 passes, all 3 quarterbacks threw 5 passes, then all quarterbacks threw 4 passes, and then all quarterbacks threw about 5 or 6 passes in the third team drills segment. But this one was in the second segment, the final pass of the 3. I really, really liked what I saw on 2 straight plays, actually, but I'm going to start with this play. I really liked what I saw from Bryan Bresee in this one. He's coming in and getting that pressure right up the middle. He's being the guy that the New Orleans Saints wanted in the first round. That's exactly what they wanted. They wanted a guy that's going to be able to come in and create a ton of pressure up the middle, be that sort of attacking interior 3-tech penetrating pass rusher. And that's who he proved to be on this on this play. And a part of what he's able to do so well is, of course, string together pass rush moves as well as his move set. We kind of talked about how Eric McCoy highlighted that in yesterday's practice, but his ability to be able to break in between these players and immediately, or this offensive line, and immediately get pressure in the face of the quarterback ends up changing everything that quarterback wants to be able to do. So in this case, what happened was Bryan Bresee broke right up the middle, and Derek Carr kind of had to lean to his right as he was throwing, kind of move out of that pressure while he was throwing. So it moved him off of his spot. And this is a lot of what Derek Carr was talking about, to where like you get moved off of your spot as a quarterback, where you want to throw the ball from being the spot, that it messes up routine and rhythm and messes up timing sometimes, things like that. And that's what we saw here, because the receiver that he was trying to target was all the way over towards the sideline, but because he kind of had to adjust his body and throw with a little bit less leverage over his center of gravity, he had to shift that center of gravity to his back foot. The pass ended up coming up short. And so Pete Werner diving for the pass ends up just being a pass breakup, but he really laid out trying to get that interception. And so I loved seeing that, because that's what you want to see all season for this New Orleans Saints team, is pressure up the middle, because they have spent so much time rebuilding that defensive interior. Colin Saunders, bringing back Malcolm Roach, Nathan Shepard's an interior pass rusher, Bryan Bresee, interior pass rusher, Jack Heflin, the guy that they brought in from the Houston Roughnecks and from the XFL, the reason why he has stood out, the times that he has stood out, is because of the pressure that he's been able to get. I don't want to leave out Jerron Cage, who's been a fantastic run defender here throughout training camp. So they have built this interior defensive line to be very aggressive. And when you can see it pay off like that and almost transition into a turnover, what more could you ask for at this point? And so that was a really, really great moment just to see the rookie, Bryan Bresee, the first-round pick with a first-round impact, and then to see Pete Werner lay out in a practice environment to try his very best to get that interception. You can call it a pass breakup because he still got his hands on it, but man, it was just a really, really good play to where you could see all of it kind of come together. And just to kind of put into perspective, the next time that Derek Carr was out on the field, he ended up connecting on 2 straight passes, one to Michael Thomas and then another one out of the backfield to Jamal Williams. So don't be worried about the defense or the offense just because the defense had a good play, right? They came right back and then they were good moving forward. The play before that, Derek Carr tried to get a pass over to Michael Thomas. This is one of those ones that maybe he wouldn't have usually thrown. It was with Isaac Yiadom in coverage. They ended up, not being able to get the pass together or be able to get the completion together. But a big part of the reason why it didn't work out is because Carl Granderson from the outside and then Nathan Shepard from the interior ended up getting pressure on Derek Carr. And then that ended up kind of forcing a throw that he would have otherwise just kind of checked down somewhere else. So that's what I mean by like the training camp throw idea of that one. And Michael Thomas was actually open. He had worked his way open, crossing the field up against Isaac Yiadom. So you saw some really good stuff. And I'm going to highlight what Sarah Toby just said in the chat here. Iron sharpens iron, which is exactly where I was going with this. You see the offense win moments. You see the defense win moments. Then you see the defense win moments. Then you see the offense surround and win moments. And although the defense was a little bit more dominant, I would say today, than the offense was a rebounding offense, I still think that I look at this team and go, okay, but yesterday the offense looked great. Remember, it was the tight ends making all the plays yesterday. Now you're seeing the defense making all the plays, and you're seeing it from guys like, the undrafted free agent rookie in Anthony Orgy that just came in, and you're seeing it from Zach Bond, who's continuing to develop as a coverage guy, but is now getting to play a little bit more of that on-ball role more consistently. DeMarco Jackson getting involved in the game as well. So there's really good situations here that you can see around how this team is continuing to get better. There was one concerning thing that happened over on the defensive side, and it was that Andrew Dowell had to leave practice early. That's what I want to get to next is let's check in on attendance as well as look in at some of the injuries that happened today, because 3 players left practice early. How concerned should you be or should you not be? Let's break that down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Oh, nope, that's the wrong one. Let's do it this way. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. I'm so goofy. Today, what we're going to take a look at is attendance as well as injuries, because we had some early exits today, but I also want to give you a couple of other practice notes from the day as well. But let's start off with attendance and all of the good stuff that comes with that. So what you should know is that everybody was present today except for the following players. Bradley Roby was not seen. Ryan Ramczyk was not seen. Andrus Peat was not seen. That's not surprising. There is a reason that Scott Lashley was not seen. Jimmy Graham was not seen during practice. I don't know if I'm supposed to say this or not, but I'm going to say it. I saw him walking around the facility, though, so I'm not too worried about that. I think it was just a vet day off for him. And then Alvin Kamara also wasn't present. Alvin Kamara wasn't present simply because of the fact that he's in New York right now. He took Gail's private jet to New York City to meet with Commissioner Roger Goodell to plead his side of the case when it comes to the charges and the events that took place around the legal situation that he had been dealing with for the past year, back during February of 2022. So he went to go and kind of plead his case in person. And so I kind of dig that. Like, it kind of makes you feel a little good about the process, because it probably, at least expedites that process a little bit more, so that you're really looking at, okay, this is kind of right at the very front of, the right at the front of the NFL's, face at this point, is that like, hey, here's Alvin Kamara here to talk to you about the thing. So maybe that moves that process along a little bit. The other thing that is that, like, I don't think that this can hurt. I don't think this can hurt Alvin Kamara. Like, I think that there's the video that's out there, but we don't know what happened before. We don't know what happened. I don't know what is being said in the video because there's no audio and stuff like that. So this is an opportunity for him to maybe provide some context that he thinks might factor into the decision-making process for the committee that eventually does the NFL investigation around all of this. Will it work? Will it not work? I don't know, but nothing to lose, right, at this point, so you might as well. So that's the only reason why Alvin Kamara wasn't there. Dennis Allen said he expects him to be back on Friday, only because there's no practice on Thursday. When it comes to some of these other guys, that Andrus Peat was going to miss time, as he's missing time with that quad strain. We'll see if he's back on Friday. Ryan Ramczyk, Jimmy Graham, probably vet days. Good chance that Bradley Roby's absence was a vet day as well. But then you had Scott Lashley, who wasn't there, number 61. Scott Lashley was waived/injured today, and so he will no longer be with the team. Then the Saints went out and they signed Tommy Kramer, and Tommy Kramer was a guy that we had all mentioned, like, hey, after the Trey Turner injury, keep an eye out on Tommy Kramer. The Saints brought him in for a workout a few days ago. It was early last week now, and so if they wanted to bring in another guard or another offensive lineman, Tommy Kramer seemed like the guy that they were going to be able to bring in. So they did bring him in and they did add him. Couple of early exits for the Saints today. Another offensive lineman dealing with an injury, this time Calvin Throckmorton with an elbow. Alontae Taylor left with hamstring tightness, and then Andrew Dowell left with what we think is a knee injury. Andrew Dowell had made a play along with JT Gray on a run stop over on the right sideline, kind of got rolled up on when that happened. He limped off the field, but then he walked across the field. And then by the time that he was about ready to go out of the Saints training facility, he was doing high knees and all this other stuff. He looked fine as he left. Dennis Allen said that he does not expect these three injuries to be big injuries at all, or to be major injuries. Thinks that these are pretty, I don't want to say insignificant, but he doesn't consider them to be as significant as like a Trey Turner situation, or maybe even an Andrus Peat situation. But we'll see how everything goes. But Andrew Dowell looked good when he looked fine when he was walking out. The hamstring tightness for Alontae Taylor, just at that position. You don't want to go from hamstring tightness to a hamstring pull, because then you have the consistent chance of retweaking that injury. And so I don't blame them for being cautious with that. I don't blame them for being cautious with another offensive lineman either. Like, if you have an offensive lineman, you just lost Andrus Peat for a couple of days. You lost Trey Turner for the entire season. Scott Lashley wasn't just waived. He was waived injured, which means that he was an injury settlement, which means he was hurt. So when Calvin Throckmorton is kind of like looking at his arm, or he comes to you and says, Coach, my elbow hurts. Yeah, go sit down, dude. You're good then, because ain't got no time for the rest of this, in terms of injuries and things like that on the offensive line. Ain't got time for it. So when I look at where the Saints could potentially go there, it just seems more likely that this is like precautionary over really anything else. And so I do think that for the New Orleans Saints, this is just kind of them playing it safe, being cautious, being cautious, and making sure that they're like not allowing anybody to have an injury that ends up getting worsened beyond the point of return or whatever. And I don't blame them for that. We'll see if those guys are back on Friday. They all have a rest day tomorrow, a day off tomorrow. So I think that will help out. All right. So they did run some one-on-ones today. If you want all the details for every single one-on-one, I'm going to be sending it out to all of our Subtext subscribers. You can join that over at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints. But I do want to list out a couple for you. And I'm going to take a look at a couple of the other wide receivers here as well. So Michael Thomas went 1 of 3 in one-on-ones, although he did work his way into good position against Marshon Lattimore. The throw was just off on one of those misses. Chris Olave, 2 of 3, and Rashid Shaheed, 2 of 3. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed continue to make big plays. Chris Olave at one point during team drills just left his defender in the dust. He was entirely by himself on that one. Another guy that had another really good day in one-on-ones is Traquan Smith. Traquan might be stringing together some of his best practices from him that we've ever seen, but we'll see how that competition continues to roll along. In terms of the top 3 corners, we saw Marshon Lattimore go 1 of 3. One of those wins being against Michael Thomas. We saw Alontae Taylor go 2 of 5, and then we saw Paulson Adebo go 1 of 4 in terms of clear wins. Some of the others would probably be like stalemates and things like that, to where there wasn't a pass breakup, but also the receiver didn't catch the ball, or the pass was thrown in an uncatchable area or something like that. So really good competition and back and forth between these wide receivers and corners. I want to highlight A.T. Perry. A.T. Perry went 2 of 3, including a diving catch during one-on-ones. So again, continuing to build a little bit of that confidence for rookie A.T. Perry, which I think is really important. And we saw 3 really solid reps from Keith Kirkwood as well. Keith Kirkwood, I think, went undefeated in one-on-ones today and was just awesome. He ran one route against Ugo Amadi with Derek Carr at quarterback. That one ended up being completed. He ended up having another one a little bit later on with Jameis Winston at quarterback. So we continuously saw Keith Kirkwood make some really good ones. But I'll tell you, the guys that have been really, really outstanding so far to watch, this goes back over to the defensive side, but whether it be in these one-on-ones, whether it be in team drills, are Marshon Lattimore and Paulson Adebo. I think Paulson Adebo is widening the gap between himself and Alontae Taylor. Alontae Taylor has had success throughout camp, but he hasn't had as much success as Paulson Adebo. And Paulson Adebo has consistently strung together a bunch of different wins. And the thing that I'll highlight for you too before we wrap up here is that with Bradley Roby out, we really got our first opportunity to get a look at Paulson Adebo and Marshon Lattimore on the outside with Alontae Taylor playing in the slot. We only got to see it for a couple of plays, but that is now starting to become maybe something that the Saints are going to start looking a little bit more at, is what do these 3 players look like when they're on the field together, as opposed to having Alontae Taylor on the sideline waiting for second team reps when Paulson Adebo is in for first team reps, and instead have him come in and be that first team slot corner, which I think, hey, look, gather as much information as you can, especially as you kind of go into, this is, the Saints practice for 4 days, had a day off, they practice for 4 days, they're taking a day off tomorrow, then they're back. And then once we get there to where they're back, then all of a sudden we're probably in a situation to where we're looking at, kind of that next phase for them after the days off. So we'll see how it works out. But I am very curious to see if, as training camp rolls along, we start seeing more Marshon Lattimore, Paulson Adebo on the outside, and Alontae Taylor in the slot. And I think that's a good thing for the New Orleans Saints to start looking at, because, man, Paulson Adebo has done a very, very good job solidifying and saying, hey, this is mine. This is my job. I think he's done a really, really good job of that. And you should feel really good about that, because what that means is either Paulson Adebo has performed so well that Alontae Taylor hasn't been able to be a part of the conversation, or eventually Alontae Taylor skyrockets to a point where he surpasses a Paulson Adebo that started with that strong of a camp. And either one of those scenarios is really, really good for you as a Saints fan, really, really good for the New Orleans Saints organization as well, to have that guy, whichever one it ends up being, whether they were a 1 or 29, opposite Marshon Lattimore after an impressive camp. And Marshon Lattimore has been phenomenal throughout camp. Just like I mentioned yesterday, he's been incredible to watch. So it's great to see another one of those solid corners opposite him also making plays. That's what you want to see here in 2023. All right, y'all, coming up tomorrow, no practice tomorrow, so there won't be a live episode in the afternoon, but we will still have a morning show. So we're going to take a look at our rookie watch, as well as get you caught up on some of the other bigger pieces from around what's going on with the New Orleans Saints right now, including a look at what's going on, like how do these other wide receivers look behind the big 3, and how are things going with Alvin Kamara? So we're going to break all that down in tomorrow morning's episode. Appreciate you, as always, y'all, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day, every day. To all you everydayers out there, thank you so much. And of course, we appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.